A lot of sirens. Reminds me of home. I mean, I guess I am home, but, like home, like New York. Anyway, welcome to day 6 of ZenMadman's Nutty Pot Limit Omaha journey. I guess that's what I'm calling it at the moment. This player has limp re-raised. Let's see, open limp re-raised with ace, ace, XX double suited. We'll just make a little note of that. As you see, I've got a one table of, Pot Limit Omaha. 50-cent $1 blinds, $100 max buy-in here on Ignition Poker, which I feel is an adequate site to play on if you are in the United States and you don't have a lot of other options. The games are fantastic, the software's okay, and some other things, exist. So we have another limp and then a min raise, which is very curious. 4 ways to the flop, Jack, Jack, Tray. I have a hard time seeing what you would want to bet with here that doesn't have a jack. If you have some kind of pair, you pretty much just, 3-3 maybe, right? The underfull, the little boat, the tugboat as I like to call it. Now, if somebody did have a jack, these are exactly the type of cards that they would be very likely to connect with full house, hit one of their, 3 kickers. But it doesn't feel like anybody has a jack. So, would you go ahead and bet maybe a straight here, I think, would have some sense. What was that? Pocket fives? Pocket fives took it down. Okay, that's cool. Cool, good for them. All right, so I've got a double suited rundown and one gapper. So I'm missing the 9. Seems like a pretty good hand to me. I would be opening this from any position. Currently anyway, subject to change. But, the gap being in the middle is better than it being at the top, but I'd rather it's at the bottom or have a pure rundown. We'd really like a 9 on the flop. 3-betting with a player who only has $27 doesn't seem super sensible to me. And, it's hard to think of a flop that we would have whiffed any harder than this. I guess we could catch a running 5 and a 6 that are not hearts or both clubs and make the nuts, but we could also catch a queen and a jack. So, it's important to think about both of your runner, not straight draws. And to then realize that they are not worth very much and throw your hand away when facing a bet and a call for that matter. So, not really a good situation to be putting money in the pot. The player who keeps betting, they have the nuts, not super surprisingly. They bet the nut flush draw on that board. They had the king, so it's like, oh, the ace came, but I have the nut flush draw. Okay. And if the king came, they would very likely be good. So they had not 11 outs to the literal nuts, but 11 outs to what would have been a very strong hand. I guess it would be 8 outs to the literal nuts, right? Because one of the hearts would have paired the board. Okay, we get a monotone flop and a bet and a... Alright, so good thing we have a note on that player who just left. 10-8-4-5. Pretty trash. Not like pretty trash, but like fairly trash or completely trash. I have a suit, but, having 3 cards to a straight flush doesn't have a ton of utility in PLO, except I guess you can make those straights. Queen 9-7 deuce. The flop goes check check. This is a very pretty wet board. Definitely a board that people with Omaha hands can hit really hard. Full pot size bet. They're suggesting that they have the straight. They did not have the straight. They had 2 pair actually, queens and 5s. I feel like if you're betting queens and 5s on that river for value, probably you don't want to go full pot. I think you're going to scare off a lot of the hands that you actually want to get, have in there against you. Ace 7-6-5, if it was suited to the ace, it's a nice hand, but it's not. Also, I'm facing a raise, or was facing a raise. Now my hand is facing the table down in the middle because I mucked it. Yeah. Open-ended straight draw would have backed into 2 pair. What's the person leading out with? Now, if they had a straight draw on the flop, there's a very good chance that they made a straight because it's not just open-enders that people are going to have. They're going to have wraps in PLO. Like when the gut shot gets there, it's a very different thing in Pot Limit Omaha than it is in Hold'em. Having said that, I think the open-ender is usually going to be a little more threatening, because if somebody has a 2-card straight draw, I think it's more often going to be that open-ender. All right, we have a raise from the cutoff and a cold call on the button. Now, the cutoff, we've seen limp re-raise double-suited aces, so when they do raise, do we subtract a little bit of that higher part of their range? I think so. I think sometimes when you have somebody who you know limps a lot, and then they open raise, you think, oh, well, they've got an even stronger range sometimes than somebody who plays tighter but never limps. But in this case, we know that some of their very good hands, they're going to limp as well, or that they're at least capable of it. So that kind of like grates some of those off the top of their range. Doesn't mean they can't have them. They could play the same hand multiple different ways. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, but we want to kind of adjust the sense of like they're not going to have as many of the great hands, because we already know that they're capable of playing them in a different way, if that makes sense. All right, top pair. Not much else to go with it. 3 fairly useless cards with it. The only nice thing about having top pair here, really, besides the fact that, you know, it could be good, is we are blocking top pair, top set, top 2, etc. We're not blocking the straight at all, but our opponents don't seem too much like they have it. If I bet here, I feel like it would be a bluff trying to get weaker 2-pair hands to fold. That might be something worth trying, but I feel like I have a little too much showdown value. Queen 9, I'm skeptical that I could get. Maybe that player would have folded. They seem a little bit on the tighter side, so they might not, you know, value bottom 2 on the flop on a straight board all that heavily. All right, we'll just go ahead and do it. Part of my thinking here was I might want to flat, let these people come in behind me. Oh, I should have picked a sizing where I could reopen the betting. But maybe not. Oh, hi, Daniel. Let's see. This does not look like a fantastic flop. I'm not blocking any of the straights. I'm going to check. What are they open raising? See, the thing though is that the SPR is so low. It's like 1-to-1, which makes folding feel kind of gross. But at the same time, I am blocking top pair, but that that means that I think their range is going to be even more weighted towards straights and straight type things. I also have to beat 2 players, and for that reason, I'm going to fold. I think my equity is a lot worse than it would be otherwise. So I don't know, what is my equity? I'm gonna mark that. Maybe I just jam that because the SPR on the flop is so low. What would have, I don't know, maybe if I chose a smaller raise size and the person behind me ends up 4-betting all in, then I have room to, I can actually jam over the top, which, you know, with aces against these players, I think would have been a pretty good scenario, pretty good way to have the hand go. As it turns out, I sort of feel like I got lucky because I think I maybe made a bad fold on the flop and got bailed out by the fact that I would have lost anyway to my opponent who made their straight. You know, I definitely fold significant equity there on the flop. So having the third player in the pot changed it a little bit, but I'm not sure how much, because my aces don't only have to hold against the one player, but the other. I'm getting 2-to-1, so I'd only need around 33% equity, a little bit more because they had like $1 and change left. Thank you. Yeah, okay, so let's get back to this hand. Looks like it was a raise and a call. Check, 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 check. And when they bet, we've seen this player bet with some kind of, I don't know. Oh, it was top and bottom pair, that hand, wasn't it? Yeah, so I think they can make thin value bets for pot size out of position. And so I don't really have any idea what they have, but I think they could definitely bet a flush like this. A jack, I imagine they would have been more likely to bet earlier. And yeah, so I think they probably don't have a jack. It seems maybe like a flush. Of course, they can have boats. And they can have some kind of a bluff. Maybe like the ace of clubs, and I don't know. Although, you know, when a player's playing 90% of their hands and they're playing them passively, we probably shouldn't think, oh, their bluffing range probably is weighted towards these good blockers, right? Their bluffing range is probably weighted towards like a mood where they feel like bluffing. But you never know. Okay, so a very small rundown, single suited. This is not the position to play that in. As was recommended yesterday, I think I'll, with single suited rundowns, play was it a 10 high and then rainbow rundowns, or maybe it's double suited 10 high and then single suited jack high, and rainbow, I guess you want the Broadway cards, right? I think you want like king high rundown, zero gapper. Okay. I have a king high flush draw, I have a queen high flush draw, but I feel like I'd probably be defending too loose against a hijack open. Playing out of position, heads up, I think in some ways my hand probably plays better than it did very multi-way, because the king high flush, queen high flush are probably going to be a little better heads up than if I have like 4 opponents. It's much more likely somebody's going to show up with the nuts. 7-7-5-4, I will over limp this. The only thing is that the big blind has just raised every hand so far, so I'm a little, you know, it might be a little dubious if this person's just like raising every hand. All right, I flop middle pair. My 7s are still my actual hands, but I'm blocking middle set and top 2, bottom 2. In terms of, you know, ouch to the nuts, a 7 would be kind of like the effective nuts, I think, if I turn it. Pretty unlikely anybody has queens if this flop checks through. Of course, if anybody bets, I'm just going to fold. And if a 6 comes, so a 3 doesn't really give me an open-ender. I am blocking the straight, so this might be an okay betting hand for bluffing. But I feel like 4 ways in the worst position, I'm not going to be super aggressive in looking for bluffing opportunities. And I basically, at this point, I have a gut shot to the nuts, which I would have 2... All right, let's actually consider this a little bit more. 3 and change to 1. I think if they bet like half pot, getting 4-1, maybe I do call. But I'm going to let this one go. Oh, and then there it is, right in the belly. Oh, that gut shot. So, you know, one thing is I don't see too much reason to think that my opponents already had very strong hands. So being able to make the, you know, they have a wheel, right? They don't even have the 6 high straight, so I didn't even need my 7 to beat them. So I think I'm not going to be able to extract as much when I hit my gut shot if somebody doesn't have, like, basically they're going to have that 6 high straight, but it's not going to be a spot where they're going to really want to put a ton of money in it. So the long shot draws, I think we generally want our opponents to have stronger second best hands. All right, and here against the 3-bet without the ace of suit, I'm gonna fold it. We haven't really seen anything from this player yet, but if I did have the ace high suit, I think, like, in my intuitive sense, that would have made the difference. Again, my 3-betting ranges and ranges against 3-bets are very sort of suspect and uneasy. That was also the weakest part of my no-limit game. I think that's probably when my limit hold'em game progressed the most. Back in the days of yore, I was mostly a limit hold'em player, like specialist. And I think when I really drilled down on what my 3-betting ranges should be, what my opponent's 3-betting ranges were, what ranges we're going to be calling against a 3-bet, and then how to play those hands post-flop, that really made a huge amount of difference for me in terms of, I think win rate, but also just confidence. And so I think I still need to um, get more confidence and understanding of just single raised pots and what ranges are like there and blind defense, and then progress to more of the 3-bet pots. But I think that will be very helpful when I do get there and do the work. Let's see. Hi, Buffy Bot. Welcome. Okay. All right, so King 10 8 7. We're gonna fold that. I think so far I've marked what, that one hand, which I think was, we've got, there's some tools I can crack open in terms of looking at that spot. The third player I think will be a little interesting in terms of trying to figure out how to analyze. In terms of just doing the math, it's a little more complicated, but it's doable. All right, so we have a raise and a call and 3/4 pot on ace queen 3. I think on boards like this, ace high boards with a flush draw, always important to note whether the ace is of the suit or not. In this instance, someone can flop top pair, and that card can be part of a nut flush draw, or then on the turn a nut flush. Not quite the same as in Hold'em, where you can't have top pair and a flush draw if the cards of the same suit. I mean, somebody can flop top set and the nut flush draw even without the ace of suit, if the ace is suited to the flush draw. All right, jacks with a suited 9 and like a vaguely relevant 5. I feel closing the action is going to be worthwhile, basically just trying to flop a set of jacks for the most part, or maybe something involving, my jack 9. Maybe having some additional equity in some spots. The 5 of hearts, I don't think is really the card that I want to use as a... I mean, having a heart blocker is nice here. Is there any merit to turning this into a bluff? Maybe. It certainly doesn't feel like my opponents are super interested in the pot. But I feel like I'm going to lose to like an ace or a king, or not. Wow. Okay. So I'd already reloaded because I just assumed I was losing that hand. So it's funny. Sometimes, like, if I had chosen that to bluff and then it worked, I'd be like, oh, I probably got someone to fold a better hand. No, they. Let's take a look at what they actually had. I'm gonna bring it up on my other screen, but yeah. So a rundown: Queen Jack 9 8 double suited. So a double suited one gapper. So that's a great opening hand that just totally whiffed the flop, had a gut shot. And then 10 7 7 5 was the other player. So they're calling pretty wide pre-flop. And yeah, that's good. Good to see. I mean, as usual, right? We're looking at this game and this person's playing 89% of their hands. We'll just highlight them, and this person's playing 79% of their hands. This is what we call the game is good. Player on my right seems like maybe they're a good aggressive player, or maybe they're not. It's too soon to tell. And this other person, what did they had some open limping business going on. I think, were they the one that they flatted with the 10-7-7 or whatever? Okay. This feels like close-ish against these players, even though I don't think it's a very good hand. I'm going to try the approach of tightening up a little bit more and really coming into the pot usually aggressively with more of the goods. And since I'm often going to have these multi-way pots and basically take more of the trying to stack people approach, but by building pots with good equity pre-flop, basically. I would have, so facing a pot-sized bet with middle set isn't always a super comfortable situation in PLO, and when you have a set and you're blocking the board pairing, that can also be bad. But here I have middle set, but I'm blocking top set, which is generally good if you have middle set, right? And maybe that person made a straight or queens and eights. Okay, what did the other person have? What did the other person have? They had ace, queen, jack, eight. So they both had like a... Okay, so they had... Oh, kings, sorry. Ace, queen, jack, eight was the winning hand. I'm going to fold. King, king, three, deuce was the player who was just going bomb, bomb, bomb. So that kind of gives a little bit more, you know, hey, maybe you want to overcall with a hand like Queen 996, you know, with a suit, because somebody's going to limp kings and then just go pot, pot, and then pay off a river bet, right? I maybe would have flatted flop and then jam turn, or I could have just repotted flop, I don't know. Against the pot size bet, I think I probably call there, but having that queen blocking the top set is fairly encouraging. So yeah, this game is just like fantastic, and is often the type of game that when an hour is up and I'm still at the table, I feel like, oh, I kind of want to play more and not do the session review. And that's an approach, you know. I mean, you can have a little bit more organic kind of flow. For me, did they just check that on the river? That was the nuts. That was the nuts. I guess maybe they're going for a check raise. Let's see the action there. Wow. So there were 4 players in the pot. Yeah, they must have been going for a check raise, but nobody had really shown any interest. So I think that's a spot where you usually want to lead out, because if you check, it's not that likely people are going to bet. Yeah, maybe you can induce a bluff, but nobody decided to bluff the first 2 streets. I think probably just straight up going for value and trying to get some kind of a, you know, a crying call or bluff catcher to call you. Makes more sense. It's not like there were a bunch of second best straights that people could make and then try and bet for value if you check to them. But yeah, I think having that kind of, you know, take it as it comes, play the good games when they're good, and then do the study when you don't have good games to play, I think that's a strategy that can work. And I might lean towards that more later. And, you know, later in the day, I do that more, right? I mean, I don't just play an hour a day. But I think having an established routine that forces a certain amount of review, a certain amount of study, a certain amount of kind of self-reflection is important for me at the moment, and I think can be important for people at various points in their poker development. All right, queen, queen, 5. Basically nothing going on here. I'm not blocking anything except for a flush draw. You know, I could bet and just try and, like, how do you pick bluffs in this spot? I think that's an interesting, you know, question. Like, on the turn, I'm mostly going to pick bluffs with equity because I can have a straight draw, I can have a flush draw. Those hands are going to make more sense. On the river, I could just, like, bet with anything, basically. That's... Maybe I want to unblock ace high because I want to get ace high to fold. Maybe that is a spot where you actually want to bet, you know, bluff the bottom of your range. In general, in PLO, I think that's not what we're going for. All right, so this is either a raise or a fold. And let's, like, if it were 4 cards... What am I doing? Okay. If it were 4 cards to Broadway, I would raised rather quickly. Having 1 suit, maybe this is more of an overlimping hand. Having the 9, maybe it's more of an overlimping hand. Seeing that one player just go ahead and fold is interesting, right? It shows that you know, they do have an overlimp fold range, which not everybody does. Some people or open limp fold. They actually overlimped, right? That was an overlimp, but I have nothing. You know, I basically just tried to build a pot pre-flop, and then if I flop good, I'm going to be able to play it with a lower SPR out of position, which I think often is helpful, right? It mitigates the positional disadvantage. And I think I probably am getting the money in good pre-flop because my opponents are going to play like all of their hands, and my hand is well above average. But when you flop nothing, you just have to be ready to hit the bricks. You know, unless you have some good bluffing opportunities, which I'm working on recognizing more. It's interesting. Right after I watched this upswing PLO course, PLO Launchpad, I had this immediate. I felt like I was recognizing good bluffing spots, sort of, kind of more intuitively. Now it's possible I actually just had more good bluffing spots. I don't know, but I feel like right now I'm missing them. So I'm gonna go back, rewatch the course, study some other materials as well, do some more of my own work, and try to kind of recapture that sense of, when to strike, right? I feel like I'm probably playing a little too timid, a little not opportunistic enough, not, you know, sometimes it's not knowing what to look for, sometimes it's not really bothering to look. And I feel like it's a little bit of both right now. I am trying to focus well on every hand I'm involved in, as well as a lot of the hands I'm not. But I think at the same time there's a little bit of a kind of tuning out when just I have air and we're multi-way, and that's a little bit of an overcorrection from the idea of like, oh, let's just blast off. And yeah, we've got three players who really want to play most of their hands, right? But that doesn't mean they're not gonna sort of give away the fact on certain hands that they're like, I'm not interested in this, right? I mean, I think one of the easiest things you can do is just pick up all the pots that people are not interested in. I'm gonna make a new notation. Over limp fold. I don't know. It's like Ovaltine or something. All right, so with this field, I think these queens are. I mean, this is kind of contrary to what I was saying before, but I do have a suit. I do have a queen 10. The 5 is a poor card, but I don't know. I think these big pair hands play pretty well because when they do flop a set, we can get a lot of money in. Our opponents are calling probably with all their smaller pairs, and so we're going to set over set people pretty frequently. I'm going to bet here because my opponents have not been very aggro in general. Let's see, what's the stack to pot ratio? 9 whatever to 1. I'm going to 3/4 it. I should have an immediate sense, like, at what stack to pot ratio with what bet size should I, like, what do I have to bet on the flop in order to get it? That's a good, I'm gonna make that a thing. I don't have a lot of note room. Let's see. We'll go here. Okay. On flop, know what bet size. Closing the action. I have the ace and the king. The ace 2-3 type thing, I think probably plays a lot better heads up than it does multi-way, because when you make the wheel with like an ace 2-3 or any kind of straight with the ace 2-3, like here, if a 5 comes, I have a straight, it's never going to be the nut straight unless it's the 2-3 and you have ace 4-5 on board. So that argues a little away from this. The arguments for it are ace king can make the nut straight. They can make top 2, top whatever, top trips with top kicker. And also, I had the nut flush draw, although I was partially blocking myself there. All right, know what bet size. I'm going to fold this. Know what bet size is required to set up all in on river with turn and river pot size bets. Okay, so I think that's a thing. That's just like a basic mathematical thing that we can just learn, right? Where there's no art to that. It's just pure science, and that doesn't mean that we always need to bet that amount at all, right? But I think it's probably a useful thing to just be aware of. Like, okay, if we have a 10-1 SPR, I mean, I know that if we have a 13-1 SPR, you go pot, 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 and you get it all in, right? That's just a fact. That's something I know. And just knowing things like that, I think is... All right, so I was going to overlimp. Whether or not that's good, I'm not certain. But against these 3 cats, I think I think this is a pretty good hand to play against them in position. Against a raise, all of a sudden, you know, the deuce looms large. It's a very bad card. I would have flopped a second nuts, which I think would have been potentially treacherous. If it checked to me, I might start betting. And if there was a bet ahead of me, to be frank, I probably would have folded. The one thing, because I had the 10, I had this nut draw to turn the Broadway, which is the nuts here. So that's an important thing to be aware of, I think, when you have outs, when you have the lower straight. Do you also have outs to the higher nut straight, or do you not? Right? Like here, ace jack would have gotten counterfeited, but if I only had jack 9, it wouldn't. I'd still only have the king high straight. All right, so kings and sevens. Looks like that seems like a pretty decent, reasonable hand. 6 is pretty bad card. If you make it a little higher, suit it. I think I'm coming in. I had a train of thought that I found really interesting. Oh yeah, it was about the bet sizing. I made a note of that, talked about it. Let's focus on the hands. Queen 8-6, very wet. My hand would have been blocking a lot of the draws, so to kind of solidify something we talked about yesterday. And then this, I'm double suited 8s. I don't know. This feels like it might be too tight, but I'm going to fold it. The 4 just feels very bad. If it was a 5, I'd definitely open raise this. Having the 8 and the 9 with the 4 all of a sudden becomes quite useless. I'm going to mark the hand in progress for review for pre-flop, as I think that's a hand where maybe yesterday I would have raised it, and maybe I'm trying to tighten up a little bit in spots like this. Especially in the earlier positions, if I'm on the button against a bunch of loose, weak players, I'm going to be able to exercise a lot more control throughout the hand. Yeah, having weaker players behind you, they're not going to be able to exploit the positional advantage as much. But having these multi-way pots out of position, I think, can be pretty awkward. All right, we fold this. But yeah, getting back to the the bet sizing thing, I think having parts of the game that we just understand fundamentally and don't have to do the math if you've already done the math and you just remember it, right? Like now I'm starting to try to figure out like what the formula is, and I have some thoughts, but that's probably not a productive way to spend time during a session, right? It's more productive to pay attention to the hands and to do that type of stuff away from the table. I had a long time ago, I was playing Pot Limit Omaha, and somebody asked a math riddle that I spent the next 2 hours trying to figure out. It turns out that the solution was kind of a cheat because the answer required parentheses, and they didn't say that that was a legitimate... basically, the order of operations. It was weird, whatever. I protest the riddle, although it makes sense if you allow parentheses. But the point being, I spent... an hour or two running through a bunch of arithmetic and trying to think, outside the box in different ways approaching some math problem. And that uses brain energy, right? And so my PLO game, I think, suffered greatly from it. We want to be able to calculate the pot very quickly, but, the more shortcuts we have, the more efficiently we can do that, the less energy we expend doing it. Okay, so full pot here on the button, on the in position, it's the cutoff. We've seen them pot with like kings on a queen high board in a situation where, I don't know, maybe that was good. I don't know. But basically play hands in ways that pot size bet from this person doesn't seem to necessarily represent. Okay, so there they had top set, right? Yeah, there's a straight on board, straight possibility, but pot size bet doesn't necessarily represent a very nutty range from this player. This seems like a good hand to overlimp if I'm going to overlimp some hands, which in the cutoff, 5 ways, getting 9-1 immediate feels like a pretty good spot when, especially when my opponents are on the weaker side. I have the backdoor nut flush draw. I have the gut shot. So I've got 3 outs to the immediate nuts and more outs to the backdoor nuts. Against a small bet, I think I'm folding anyway, but against a raise, there's really not much to it. I'm not blocking any of the pairs, and I am blocking a lot of the draws, so my opponents, I think, are going to be weighted more towards the pairs, which now can be, boats if they have 2 pairs set on the flop. With everybody checking, it feels like the in-position player is either trying to trap everybody else and let them catch up, or that they just had some kind of a draw and things did not work out the way they planned. All right, garbage goes in the garbage. Even, this is a very tempting scenario if it folds to me to play a lot of hands. And I think when it does come to playing a range that's not that tight, I think this would be the spot. But again, the rake's very high. I have to beat 3 players a lot of the time. And, garbage is garbage. So this hand wouldn't even be a one that, I'm not talking about whether or not you'd want to play this hand, but, make the 2 like a 5 or something. And it's a sort of situation I think people can talk themselves into because it looks like a really good situation to play a lot of hands, but you still don't want to, expand too much. We have seen the person limp and fold who had been the limper. So in that spot, maybe we don't want to overlimp too much because we are going to get a fair amount of folds from that player, and then we get dead money, blah, blah, blah. But the 2 players in the blind set are playing more than 80% of their hands, so the odds of them both folding quite low. Not to mention the fact that the one player who limped actually hasn't raised a single hand, so they should have hands like aces and kings and some really nice stuff in their limping range as well, along with tons of garbage, because they're basically playing, I think, about as many hands as you want to play heads up. They're just playing those multi-way in a 6 max game, which, you don't usually want to play your heads up range in a 6-handed game. Okay, Jack, 8-8. I'm going to come in with this hand. Basically 2 set draws, plus, there's a nut straight I can make, and a second nut straight I can also make. All right, so I think I'm going to do more of a half-bot type scenario here. This is a spot where, I think you're generally supposed to kind of like check range, is my understanding, when you're out of position like this. I'm not sure how good that actually feels in practice, but against looser, more passive players, I think having, really trying to go for that balance doesn't make all the sense. I should start observing whether this player behind me, since they are fairly aggressive pre-flop, and by fairly aggressive, I mean they're raising 62% of their hands. They're very aggressive pre-flop. Maybe, they're betting a lot when check to. I might add that to HUD, to my heads up display. Let's see. That one checks to what? There's what is it? Bet versus missed C bet or something. What happened? Okay. Because in that spot, if I know my opponent's going to bet a lot, then I can start check raising them. And when they have air and I have something like a set, I didn't totally have the board crushed. I mean, they can't have top set. They can't have top 2. They can have top 2, but I'm blocking that. Without the suited ace, I'm going to fold this. But I think one thing to look out for there is, I'm not blocking the 9, 10, or the 6, or the 5, right? So I'm blocking the jack, so it's going to be harder for them to complete 9, 10. They're not going to have as many good wraps and stuff. but they can still have a lot of open-ended straight draws. If my opponents are likely to bet those, then check raise seems like a way to go. But yeah. All right, we have a half pot bet from the, more, reasonable looking player on the button, I guess. What's that going to represent? I think they usually are going to have an ace here. If they don't, they probably have some big wrap. On the button, they could have come in with something like, 7-6-5-4, stuff like that, 6-5-4-3. So if they don't have a straight here, which it feels like they don't, then they probably flop some kind of 2-pair, or maybe just put a bet out there with ace and a few overs where they have a good top 2 draw. And we've seen that a couple times from them now, where they bet the flop straight or boat. The nuts change on the turn, they check it back and then give up, which is a very reasonable thing to do pretty often in PLO. Okay, this person definitely needs to be marked green. In fact, all of these people could be purple. This is one of the best tables I've ever seen in a poker game. It's really quite phenomenal. I mean, I have 3 players playing 70 to 90% of their hands. So I don't know. I don't feel like leaving when the time is up. I have to say this game's like a little too fantastic. I don't know. It's Saturday. I could do a longer session today. Could just stay at this table till these this is another hand that's kind of tempting with these people in the hand, but like the 5's just really a garbage card. It shouldn't be tempting, right? It's crap. But yeah, I mean, I could play until the game's not amazing, and then I'll do the review. I think I'm gonna lean towards that. In chat, we have population overstabs IP. Yeah, that makes sense, right? I think, especially if, I mean, that can even be a reasonable exploit on their part against people out of position playing very transparently. Like, do people out of position check raise too infrequently? The population, I think, probably does, would be my guess. So if so, then, stabbing too much in position would make sense. Which is not to justify them, but to say it's logical that that's a thing, and we should exploit that. So given that, I think going for the check raise with both those sets, right? I had a set of queens earlier, then set of 8s. We don't want to draw too much conclusion from the fact that my opponent's folded and, I should have done something different. That's not a great way to look at the game. But if we actually have some inclination that people are going to bet a lot more in that spot, if we check to them, then they're going to call if we bet, then I think we want to take advantage of that. So the way to do that would be to do a lot of check raises, which is probably fundamentally correct anyway. I think I was going for an exploit by betting both of those sets out of position on fairly dry boards, not super dry. There's a, not like Omaha dry, right? But dry in terms of just like there's no flush draw, and there's the 2 connected cards, so there's some straight possibilities. So like medium dry, an average amount of vermouth. That was a Jeopardy question last night. What's the difference, or what do you put less in a dry martini, or if you ask for a dry martini? Apparently, it's less vermouth. Now you know. Which I didn't know, but I didn't really know what dry meant. I knew what neat meant. That was another. There was a lot of alcohol related questions on Jeopardy last night. All right, we get a raise from the aggro player on our left. We're not in the hand or anything. Yeah, and a flat. Pretty much what we expect to see pretty often in this spot. Given that, having a hand like some kind of robust aces, this is a pretty decent spot to do, if you're ever gonna limp re-raise, if you have an aggro player on your left and then some looser players on their left, it's a spot where if I limp and they make it 450, then call. What can I make it? I can make it like 450 times 5. So like 2250, I believe. Plus the blinds. So 24, get a quarter of the stack in pre-flop. This is also a nice spot where they're going to raise pretty often. They didn't this time. That's fine. But if they do, then, this is kind of like trapping the field. When I first came up playing No Limit Hold'em in these super wild games, we'd have, situations where the person on my left would raise a lot, and then they would go call, and then you just like bomb it. That was a very effective exploitative approach back in the day. It's probably still pretty effective now. All right, so I flop top set with no blockers to the flush. I have no blockers to the boat. I'm going to check, and I think this opponent is going to play pretty straight up in this spot. And if it goes this way, like I'm kind of tempted to, I'm going to bet $3 because I think that, what am I trying to get value from though? So I didn't think that through. So I've got top set, and then I'm blocking the queen as well. So there's just not much that I can get value from there. That is a blocker bet that I think I put out there more as a like, oh, don't bet half pot if you have a flush. But like, I don't know. I probably am better off giving them a chance to put money in that they shouldn't. All right, so king, jack, 7-7, double suited. I'm suited to a king and a jack. That's okay. The sevens also, I think, I am out of position, but my opponents have very wide ranges, and I think they're going to make a lot of mistakes post-flop. So I think this is a hand that, against this particular lineup, is playable in this spot, even if, the flush draws aren't going to be super good. This person's just going to pot it if they have, like, anything. I'm not blocking the straight. I have a jack-high flush draw, which isn't fantastic. I don't have any straight draws. So basically I have a pair of jacks and a jack-high straight draw right now. And if like a 5 comes, I'd be blocking the lower straight. Calling this pre-flop, the idea wasn't that on the turn I could be drawing to what's basically a bare jack-high flush. So I'm going to put it in the muck, even though, there's some chance it's good. If I get there, the jack-high flush. All right, so we get a full pot bet there on the river. Somebody's supposed to have the straight. Nobody has any straights. Maybe they thought they had a boat. I don't know. They had a set. It was a set of queens. Looks like it kind of came and went fast. So queens with a suit. The 8 plays with the queen. The deuce is a crap card, but in position against these people. One thing to note is that the player on my left has been aggressive pre-flop, but not 3-betting, right? They've been aggro with their first into the pot raise, but when somebody raises, they just like want to play every pot for one raise. Okay, let's see. This is potentially a good bluffing hand, but against this player, I feel like it's kind of optimistic. If they're putting, like, if it checked to me, I might use this as a good bluffing hand. But when my opponent already wants to be aggro, I'm less likely to play back at them with my own aggression, if that makes sense. Simply because they've already said, like, hey, I kind of like this flop, and I'd rather use my aggression against someone who's like, I don't know how I feel about this flop. And I'm like, oh, I feel good about it. And they're like, all right, fine, you have it. I think, that's one of the things I'm trying to do more of, see, oh, I have a pretty good bluffing hand, but then read the action and think, okay, how has the context changed? They're a flop or wrap on a paired board, which I think can be a little fraught. This is a pretty good hand. And again, the player behind us doesn't do a lot of 3-betting. We're probably going to get a 3-way, maybe 4-way pot. In fact, nobody at this table so far has done a single 3-bet, at least, filtered for 5 or 6-handed or whatever this is filtered for. So I'm going to flop a lot of, nice kind of straight draw things. I can make a nut flush. I can make, I can have a weak flush. There's a lot of good boards here. That's not a great board. I have an open ender. Only the bottom end is going to be to the nuts. I do have bottom pair, which is nice, and backdoor nut flush draw. I'm not blocking any of the bigger, sets and 2-pair hands. And now, this player betting here it's kind of a little bit of a confirmation of like maybe they are stabbing a lot, and they can have a strong hand. There's a lot of draws they can have that dominate my draw. I'm going to fold, but I do feel like I should probably start check raising them a lot with both. If I could have those sets back, I think I'd definitely go ahead and check raise those. And if I pick up a strong draw, I can play a strong draw aggressively as well, and put some bluffs in there, and do a lot of checking on the flop. But checking doesn't mean always playing passively, right? We can check and then raise. It's allowed. It's there's no sign, but somewhere it should say check and raise is allowed. For streaming, I should get like some like hilarious old school poker signs, say things like check and raise is allowed, no going the overs, or what, I don't know, some of these weird things that they used to say. And if some, yeah, okay, I'm gonna fold. My top pair and my queen high flush draw I don't think are worth very much when somebody wants to pot it on a second 3 on the board. Jack 9-8 with suit. So that's 3 cards. We get dealt 4 cards, and ideally we want the 4 cards to work together in the Pot Limit Omaha. This one I am going to come in. Maybe raising or folding most of the time, since the big blind is basically just like they're raising a ton. Oh, cheers. Let's see. All right. Focus on the action. Let's see. So this person hasn't, if I had a spade blocker, I think this is the sort of thing that would be a good bluffing up situation, because we have 2 players who weren't very interested in the flop. The one person seems fairly straightforward and aggressive, but, when they check, sometimes that's like an alarm bell if somebody bets a ton, if they're very aggressive, and then all of a sudden they're like quiet. It's like, oh, what are they quiet? Are they setting a trap? And here I have 2 9s and a jack, but that deuce is just, it's a bad card. It's a bad card. And I guess I'll say hello to Slack Shark. Got a good chat going today. It's definitely fun having. At some point, I'm gonna actually proactively promote my stream. I was thinking of doing that today. I have this cycle of procrastination that goes something like this. It's like, all right, I want to do a thing that's like some sort of content creation. I want to promote it, but before I promote it, I want to like respond to a whole bunch of things that like have been piling up, or like people I feel like I need to get in touch with. But I kind of want to have that thing going, because like I have this sense of like, oh, what have I been doing? I haven't really been doing anything. I mean, I've been doing things, always doing things, but yeah. So it's this this irrational cycle of not getting things done. I should write a book like the David Allen book, but it should just be how to not get things done. And yeah, I mean, I oscillate between getting a lot of things done and like getting not things done. So sometimes tax season is actually very, very good for me, because like I have to do it eventually, and then once I do, I have this reminder like, oh, that's what it feels like to get things done. It's like so much easier than the not doing. The not doing is exhausting. It uses so much mental energy to not do something that actually doing it is just much more easier. remember I wrote something down a year or so ago, like make something easier to do than to not do, or make it more uncomfortable to not do a thing than to do a thing. That's funny. They had 4-pair. That 4-pair was the winning hand. That's the rare 4-pair. Queens and 4s and 6s and 10s. And I guess technically they had a flush. But I like to think that 4-pair was the winning hand. So really pretty terrible board. Yeah, I have an overpair. The only suit that didn't come is my suit. Now I'm not blocking any of these straights, but I do have top set. I'm pretty happy about it. I'm going to let them bet, as I don't really want to put... Oh, that's a doozy. Check raise was not allowed when I played. Yeah, that's a Methuselah experience, I think. All right, so Jack 8, an 8, and any card from a Jack through a 4 makes a straight. Now, like, I'm not inclined to give my opponent too much credit, but I think there's a reasonable chance they have an 8. And then it's just so easy for them to have anything from a Jack through a 4 just by accident, right? Like, they don't have to be trying to make a straight here. It's so easy for them to just accidentally have a straight. I'm not blocking, like, any of it. I'm going to put that for review, but also, that's one of those hands that oh, no. It's the previous one. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. I like to... Yeah, so the deuce here is really just the killer that makes me not want to play this one. And yeah, it's the nice thing about Ignition is, like, there can be this tendency sometimes that you really don't want to indulge in or reinforce. That's like a tendency to like want to know whether or not someone's bluffing, and sometimes people call because of that. Kings with a suit, I'm gonna raise. The 6 and the 2 connect barely. And the thing about Ignition is, like, you can just make the fold, and then you can go back later and be like, oh, let's see. Did they have it? Did they not have it? You know, you don't want to make big adjustments based on that. But over time, you can develop a sense. Do they usually have it when I fold? You know, you can even, like, break down the data and be like, oh, you know, looking at... I mean, you can make a spreadsheet of all the times you fold a bluff catcher, and all the times you call with a bluff catcher, and you could... Because you can see what the pot odds were, and you can see what they actually had, you can study what your accuracy is. That sounds like a lot of work. Maybe worthwhile, maybe too much work for something that's not going to be as worthwhile. I think at higher levels against a more stable player pool, it might have more value. All right, let's see what's going on in the chat. Check out verse 63 of the Tao Te Ching and imagine it to be very serious. Okay, I will make a note. 63. I have been thinking about reading some of that some more. This hand's, like, tempting because they're playing 60 whatever %, and I have to believe I'm doing okay against that. And I think you probably could actually justify a call, not just rationalize one. But I'm actually going to mark that as far as a pre-flop spot, even though I don't have a really good way of analyzing it. And we'll come along. I'm not really playing a raise or fold strategy in this small blind complete. It's kind of an ideal place to be completing some hands. On the flop, I got backdoor nut flush draw, blocking none of the pairs, blocking a diamond, blocking some of the straight draws. So, you know, I got a little bit going on, but against a 3/4 pot bet, even from an aggro player, yeah, just fold. Daniel says would also fold 10-10 there. Yeah, it's like, it's just, the bluffs got there, right? Like, the turn bluffs just got there so much, and it's, you know, there's as little respect as I might have for my opponent's range. It's like, on the river, there's just so many straights. So, let's see. Every time I produce, say, 2 videos in 8 days, I'm like, oh, I could just do it all the time like this, and then I don't produce another. Oh, man, for 4 weeks. Yeah, back in the day when I made videos, like, somehow I made videos every day for 28 days. And but then like I would have time, I would have like I would have times when I couldn't make any videos for like a year or months or whatever. And I was getting paid, good money per video. So it was like, what was up with that? Like, and I think overall it was from expectations, right? Placing too high expectations on the content I was producing. Right now, I have much lower expectations. I'm kind of just building habits. I think what I'm creating is hopefully educational for some people and entertaining and has as much value for me as it does for any viewer. Wow, so that was, I think we had top two, right? I mean, we folded, but had top two and somebody had second set anyway. So I think that's a good reminder that like just because you have something blocked doesn't mean someone doesn't have it, right? Like we're blocking a lot of stuff there, but they have it anyway. All right, so this is the first 3-bet from somebody, and this person's been so aggressive that there can be a feeling like, oh, maybe I want to like 4-bet double suited kings. Now the 8 is not a great card, so basically it's like king, king, queen with a dangler. Double suited, obviously I'm going to call this. I think in general 4-betting, we don't want to have a king in our hand. We do want to have an ace. If the 8 were an ace of hearts, maybe we play it. All right, so I'm going to call, and we're going to flop huge. That's the plan. And we're going to check because this person's going to bet a lot. They're going to have top set a lot. And we have the nut straight, and we have an extra blocker to the nut straight. And do I want to play this fast and just put the money in? I think so. I think they're going to have top set very often. Sometimes they'll have a flush draw to go with it, but they'll need the other 2 cards to be diamonds in order to do that. Sometimes they'll also flop the nuts with me, but like c'est la vie. If they just, yeah, okay. So what do you got? Okay, you got top set, and if you get there, you got there, good. Oh, and just like the kick in the nuts is like, oh, you also get kings full here. Okay, well, I had actually just clicked sit out anyway, so that was a cheerful way to end the session. Let's see. I'm gonna mark that hand, although I don't think there's that much to say about it. Let us catch up. Oh, you didn't? Yeah. This nice Daniel guy again. You're the one thinking that a streamer does not know everything from yesterday. Yeah, I mean, you always listen to streamers. Everything, and more importantly, everything you hear on the internet. I think everybody saying something, using words on the internet, always an authority. So, yeah, definitely never second guess anybody. And if people say conflicting things, they're probably both true and you just don't understand how they can both be true. Okay, replay all hands in report. Let's get this up here. And this. And not that, but this. Let's make it look a little less bad, if still kind of mediocre. There we go. Oh, there's a chess move in my game. Rook A3. Rook A3. Okay, Rook B2. There's few enough pieces on the board. I think I can play blindfold the rest of the game. Although I won't, because I really don't want to lose that game. Okay, let's see. What are we going to do? Oh, I think we're just good to go. Okay, and we're back. That was a section that I cut out for the YouTube video. So, we're going to review some hands. Still face... Yeah, oh, yeah, but you didn't have to create really long PowerPoint. Yeah, I did, though. I mean, I didn't have to, but I often did. And, like, I wanted to be like, oh, I'm going to do this whole PowerPoint thing coming in. And I think I've felt a little more liberated just being like, I'm just going to make something that I think has some value. And, the people who like it eventually will find it. And, I'll try and promote it to people who I think will like it. And I won't worry too much about trying to be perfect, because what's going to be perfect? Nothing's perfect. And you know, just try to improve a little bit every day. And like a year from now, hopefully I'll be creating really awesome high level content. And at the moment, hopefully I'm creating something that has some value to some people. And some value to me, because every day I'm reviewing hands here with my friends. Okay, king, king, queen, 8. Not a lot to say pre-flop. And then we get a... there's got to be a way to, like... I want to mark this idea. Where is it? Okay. How to remove delay midstream, like runoff delay. I imagine that's a thing, right? Because if that's a thing, then I can like take a 2-minute break, come back, and then we're live. Because on the review, I'd really like to be live. I think it would be better for discussion, whereas during the session, not as much. Okay. Session review time. King, 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 queen. No, just 2 kings, not 3 kings. All right, so kings with a queen 8, double suited. I raise. I've got to move these HUD panels again. Why do they keep... Oh, I know why. Because I haven't hit this save layout. Okay, there's the layout. I get 3-bet by someone who's been super aggressive but hasn't 3-bet yet so far. So I think their range is just like aces. I think that's basically their range. And I call... because what else am I going to do? I don't really want to get a whole bunch more money in against aces. Unless they have 4 aces, I don't think I'm in great shape. But, I mean, I'm in good enough shape, right? And we catch a lovely flop where I have the nuts, and I have an extra blocker to the nuts. So I think it's very likely that I'm the sole owner of these lovely Broadway nuts. Yeah, so I check. I think this opponent... First of all, it's going to have top set here, like always. And they've been pretty aggro, and I think they're going to bet top set here, like always. And they do. And I decide to raise right away. I could have called and then tried to jam, get it in on the turn if it's not a bad card. But I think that's like overthinking it, especially out of position. In position, maybe messing around with some sort of angle like that might make some sense. But here, no thanks. So we just get the money in. And the reason I marked this hand is partially just to kind of look at the equities and remind myself, like, how much do I have on the flop? The turn I have 0, and on the river I make this totally useless boat of kings because they have aces full, of course, which made sense. Did they have? Yeah, if they hit a king, so they did have a redraw to the nuts, so they could hit a king. They didn't have the flush draw, which is unsurprising because we already knew 2 of their cards were going to be aces that could not be the ace of diamonds because that was on board. So we're going to take a look at the equity calculator, right? That's the idea here, is I basically want to see, okay, not on the turn or the river. We already know that we were drawing dead. And we want to calculate equity here. Good luck, good game, nice hand, well played later. Pieces. And 60% equity against their particular hand. And their particular hand wasn't the best aces, but they wasn't the worst aces, right? Let's see what happens if we give them the king of diamonds, which we don't have, right? Yeah. What's our equity going to be now? Now we're chopping, but they have about, 20% of the... No, more than 20% of the time. Yikes. They're going to make a boat like around a third of the time, a boat or better. So if a third of the time they're going to scoop, I should have around 30-ish% equity here, I think. All right, 31.4. Cool. Nice to know that the math skills are not totally atrophied. And then we'll give them the queen of diamonds. And now, yikes, I think I'm going to have more like, I don't know, 17, 18%? Is that going to be right? Because they're going to scoop more than 60%. Yeah, I'm going to say around 20, a little under 20. Yeah, 18%. Okay. And now if we don't give them, if we give them just like a random diamond draw. So basically what I'm doing here is saying, against different types of aces, how am I doing? Against the nuts plus aces, I'm doing quite bad. Against the nuts and aces and the nut flush, a flush draw, I'm getting smoked. Against just aces And this is with the gut shot and the flush draw. I think I'm going to be a dog, but not a big dog. Oh, a pretty big dog. Wait. Yeah, okay. That's okay. So they've got 64% there. I underestimated that one. And let's do this one. Oh, that's got a straight flush draw. So we'll not give him a straight flush draw. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All right. So if they have aces and the flush draw, I'm in quite bad shape. Let's now give them one time just aces with nothing, and I should have this should like flip here, right? Almost exactly. I've got 63%, they've got 36%. So against all the aces, the way to solve that would be with pro poker tools, or to know how to actually use this program. Okay, valid description, 4-card hands. Is there a way to single range selector? Let's try that. Okay, any pair. No. This is how we're going to do it. I think we're just going to give them pairs of aces. And we're going to delete the manual range. And we're going to see whether this works. Okay, all right, we've learned a thing. I think I might have less than 50% equity here. Thinking, how often are they going to have the flush draw? How often am I going to be behind? I think it's going to be close to 50-50 against aces. Oh, no. Oh, no. No, that was off. Much better, much better. So I'm about 60-40 against aces and 2 random cards, which I think is around this person's range, right? I don't remember seeing them flat with, 3... Okay, that's probably... Uh-oh. When they flop a set, we're going to flop some flush draws. Here we flop a straight. I think they're going to, because of what we've seen, they're going to bet, their top set here, which they're going to have very often. We've looked at the equity. We're doing very well equity-wise against just all aces. I don't think they're ever going to fold top set. A player like this doesn't wait to get aces and 3-bet it, flop top set, and like bet fold the flop or whatever. They're just going to get it in. They do. And we lose. And I don't think there's a whole lot more to discuss about this hand anymore. I had already sat out because the second really loose player had left, and so now there's just this one player, and because of where the button was moving, I was going to be the big blind anyway, so it was a convenient time to lose all my chips. If you're going to lose all your chips, might as well be at a convenient time. But I feel pretty comfortable with how I played the hand, so let's move on to some other scenarios. This looks horrible. That's less horrible. Okay, cool. Next hand. All right, Queen 9-8-6 with this hand just looks pretty bad, but there's a razor. Oh, no. Okay, go back. All right, we'll hit play anyway. The razor's very loose. They're going to have a ton of hands. It folds to us in the big blind, and I end up folding. I think maybe you could argue for a call here. It's not a very good hand, but this player's range is going to be more like, I think it's going to be along the lines of a regular button opening range, is my guess. Possibly even wider. It's also a little less than a pot-sized bet. So I need to see how I want to... I think one thing to remember when playing is when defending the big blind, which I basically have no idea what the correct ranges are, but when defending the big blind, we want to play against our opponent's range, not just against their position. Yeah, good players, we can think, okay, the range is probably this because this is their position. But when somebody's raising 61% of their hands, we know that they're going to have a very different range. It doesn't matter whether they're the hijack raising 61% or whether they're the button raising 20%. Like, which position it is doesn't matter. What their range is what matters. So against this range, maybe this is a hand to defend. I'm really not sure. I don't have a lot to go on here. But just kind of a reminder to, I guess that's the next thing after having the pre-flop open raising ranges really nailed down. Okay, King Jack 9 deuce. Oh, jeez. All right, I'm a little thrown off, but we'll just recenter. Okay. Against a limper, I'm going to fold this. Against, if there was no limper, I mean, this is a trashy hand, right? Because of the deuce. But against players that I really want to play with, like maybe you can make an argument. I'm not entirely certain why I marked this hand. Was this the one where then... No, I don't know. All right, we'll proceed. And if at any point on any of these hands you have a question or comment, obviously always welcome to bring that. I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability to whatever questions there are. And let's see. Okay, folds to me. I have a tens with a suited ace. It almost says at. Okay, I think our resident Star Wars fan has left the chat, but this looks like some sort of Star Wars vehicle. AT2T, I don't know. So I raise, I get a call. I have an overpair, which I think isn't worth very much here. If a jack comes, then I'm blocking the nut straight, and I can start maybe thinking about kind of bluffing with my hand. And I check, my opponent checks back. I do turn a set. There's maybe some merit to betting here, but so 8-6 was already there. Jack 8, I'm unblocking. That might have bet the flop with with the gut shot, but I decided to play it on the passive side, and my plan was to check call twice. But when the 6 comes, now any of their semi bluffs basically got there, except for hearts. Hearts missed. I'm unblocking hearts, so they're gonna have some whiffed heart draws. But the 6 is just like, there's just all the straight draws got there, basically. And so I do think, even against this like loose aggro player, I still think folding tens is the sensible thing to do. So I try to do that. Okay, ace, ace, queen, 5. This is going to be a raise, I think, basically against pretty much any action. I raise, and I flop top set on this flushy board, and I remember I bet the river here. My first thought is I don't really want to build a big pot out of position when my opponent could have a flush. There's not a lot to get value from also. I mean, there's bottom set, middle set, and then like bottom 2 pair, stuff like that. But it's kind of, it's not way ahead, way behind, but it's like way ahead, medium behind, and not much to get value from if I'm way ahead. So I played it passively. I think it made sense. The turn also, like, they can check back some smaller flushes. I'm still not really looking to get a whole bunch in the pot. The thing about PLO on these monotone boards compared to Hold'em is people are going to have a lot of flush draws on a board like this in Hold'em, whereas in PLO they can't have a flush draw, right? Because they can't. That's not how the game works. Either they have a flush or they're never going to make a flush in this hand. Those are the two options. So I decide, there's not a lot of draws to get value from. My 5 is blocking the straight and the straight draws. I decide to go ahead and make this blocker bet here. I think even going smaller might have had some value. The thing is, not only, I'm blocking the straight. Okay, cool. But not only am I blocking top 2, any kind of aces up type hand, I'm also now blocking queens up, or a set of queens or whatever, which is maybe what I'm trying to get value from here. So while I think there's a very strong chance my hand is good, and I don't really want to face a big bet, if I face a big bet, maybe I can just fold anyway. But I don't think there's a lot of utility in this bet, because it's just like, what am I trying to get them to call with? What do they have? They have nothing. Like, maybe they have 7-6 or 7-4 or something, I guess. But against that, maybe betting $1 or $2 would be better. I don't know. I think my thought process here, I really didn't give any consideration to the fact that I blocked this queen, and I wasn't saying to myself, like, I think every time we make a bet for value, we need to think, okay, what hands might I be trying to get value from here? And I skipped that step, and so that's less than ideal. Okay. I won the hand anyway. They folded, but I put money out there. It should always be a coherent thought process and a reason when we put money out there. I did want to say, G-Treat Bullets, thanks for the follow. Very helpful in getting trying to get to those elusive 50 followers, and yeah, it's coming along. So I hope that you're getting something from the stream. All right, 8994 double suited. Yeah, this one I just wanted to look up. Just like, I think I play this in the cutoff. I definitely opened it on the button. You know, it's nice being double suited, but the suits are low, and this pot's very likely to go multi-way. So I think the utility of the suits goes down significantly. That's more like a backup plan with let's see, double suited 8s, hijack, RFI, this sort of thing. 665 deuce, that's probably weaker than this. I mean, the deuce connects to the 5 and the 6 in a better way than the 4. The 4 is really pretty useless because, you know, 5, 6, 7, we already have a straight with the 8, 9. So this kind of feels like a 3-card hand, right? Where the 4, it's suited, so that's nice, but its rank doesn't help as much. But so I think this hand is probably like barely playable in the hijack, but in this scenario, I don't think it plays that well. I end up folding, and we'll go to the next hand. Okay, we have a limp, and I have aces again. So, yeah, this hand I remember. Okay, so first of all, there's like, do we want a 3-bet or do we want a flat? I have decent aces, not great aces. I have a suit and the deuce connects. The 9 is like one of the worst cards to have with your aces, especially when your other cards, like a wheel card or a king or something, it just doesn't really do anything. But my opponent, you know, the raiser had been raising a good number of hands, so I go ahead and raise, and this person jams. So again, looking at this, I forgot to notice, like, okay, who's behind me, right? There's this very loose passive player that I like to play some hands with, and then this person has $23 stack, right? So if the bet is $4.50, if I make it $13.50 and they make it $23, then that reopens the action, because I would be raising 9 more, and then they would be raising what did I say, $13.50? They'd be raising $9.50 more, right? So their raise needs to be as big as my raise. So I could have made it $12.50 here, and then if they jammed, that reopens the action. I can just get it all in pre-flop, which seems like a pretty nice situation. Having said that, I don't think this is necessarily bad. There's a reasonable chance this player just folds, and then if I've made it $12.50, now we've got 25 in the middle instead of 30-ish. So I think, you know, we maybe lose a little bit of value there. But anyway, them coming in with the stack, and then they come in, and then I come in. You know, I think this is fine. We've basically got a 1-to-1 SPR, and I've got aces, and I'm blocking, you know, top set, top 2, top and bottom. I'm blocking some of the rundowns that really smash this board. So do I want to just stick it in here? Do I want to check? If I check, like, am I getting them to put it in with more hands than they would put it in with? I think jamming is maybe the play. This requires a more nuanced ability to evaluate really ranges and how they hit this board. But knowing that, you know, okay, first of all, they can have some like king, king, queen, queen, jack, jack type stuff that needs to decide what it wants to do. It's going to be folding some equity, particularly if they have, you know, queens or jacks with maybe a 10. They're going to have some straight draw type stuff. 10-7, yeah, is possible. My 9 actually discourages some of those sort of rundown hands, right? Like they can't have, or 10-9-8-7, they can't have as often as they would if I didn't have the 9. If they have something like that, I'm just going to be crushed. But I think I sort of overweighted the possibilities of that in my mind. And I also have to remember, when I check and they bet, or however this money goes in, yeah, I'm playing against 2 opponents for the main pot. So that's 70 in the middle. I need, you know, I only have whatever percent of that, but I'm still getting 1-to-1 heads up on this money that's going in. So I only need, you know, 50% equity heads up in order to continue. It doesn't matter that the third player undermines some of my equity. Yeah, if I have, you know, if I have 33% three ways, then that's also good. Or if I have 50% heads up. So I think that gives me like multiple ways of getting it in good here. And because the SPR is so low, you know, if the SPR was much higher, we had like $500 stacks with 70 in the middle. I think pitching my hand makes more sense. However, given the really low SPR and the fact that I only need to beat one person to win the side pot, I think I probably should have just open jams my aces. Now, as it turned out, I did fold the best hand, right? I would have, you know, my aces would have beat these queens for the main pot if the third player hadn't come along and had an open-ended straight draw. But if we look, they actually just had a bare, you know, an open-ended straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. So I'm doing pretty well equity-wise against that. And a lot of their range is going to be stuff like this and stuff that whiffed that, you know, maybe that's going to check back and maybe I get a cheap free showdown, whatever, against that. But I really don't like my play here anymore. I think I probably just put the stack in and lose it to a hand like this that almost assuredly calls, even though, I mean, maybe they don't. Maybe they fold because they, you know, they probably call though. But yeah, I think I misplayed that one. And it looks like that's the last hand, and we'll end on that very cheerful note. So in this hand, I misplayed and I should have gotten stacked, right? And the first hand of the review, which was the last hand of the session, I think I played correctly and did get stacked. So I played a hand right and lost all my chips, and I played a hand wrong and avoided losing all my chips. So that's just a reminder that, like, in basically any poker game, we can't see what happens and think, you know, oh, the results are going to tell me what I did right and wrong. In the long run, the results will tell you whether what you're doing overall is right or wrong, right? Whether it's right enough to beat the rake, to beat your opponents. But our short-term results can be just there's a lot of dissonance in terms of something actually teaching us anything about how we're supposed to play. So really we need to, you know, open up our hands and dig into them and, you know, do session reviews like this. And, you know, I need to put even more work in, which I'm doing away from the stream. You know, I'm not streaming 100% of my poker work. I think I would lose my voice if I did. Gotta get some tea. I'm gonna go have some tea. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Twitch, thanks for being here for the stream, and give a follow if you haven't. All these things are free. So yeah, thanks a lot. Cheers.